Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's podcast. My name's Charlotte, and I work as a Year 2 teacher in a primary school in London. If you haven't heard any of Hanaz Writers Podcasts before, then have a listen on their podcast channels. They've got one on Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, YouTube, and Spotify. You can search for Hanaz Writers Podcasts on these websites and you can start listening to them as soon as you want. In the next few podcasts, I'm talking about 7 different types of creative writing. And they are poetry, plays, movies and television scripts, fiction, such as novels, novellas, and short stories, songs, speeches, memoirs, and personal essays. In my previous podcast, I already talked about how short stories, novels, plays, movies, and television scripts and songwriting are thought of as creative pieces of writing. And I compared each different type of writing to each other and discussed how they were similar and different. So in today's podcast, I'm going to be talking about another creative form of writing for poetry. I'm going to discuss how it is a form of storytelling and also how similar and different it is from the other forms of creative writing. In particular, of course, songwriting. In my previous podcast, I did talk about songwriting. Now, poetry does, of course, share roots with this type of creative writing. They both share rhythm in their pacing, rhyming words, and their short, simple sentences, but they are also very different creatures. So let's explore. What makes poetry poetry? And how does it differ from songwriting? Why do they both continue to speak to us in such a deeply emotional way? So first of all, what is poetry? Poetry is one of the oldest forms of creative expression. Before we had novels and screenplays and stories, we had spoken verse that was rhythmic, emotional, and often passed down from one person to another orally. Now, poetry is defined less by its form and more by its intention. It condenses thoughts and feelings into precise, powerful language. It plays with imagery, metaphor, symbolism, and most importantly, the language itself. Now, a poem might rhyme, or it might not. It might have structure to it, like, say, a sonnet or a haiku, or it might be a free verse and it breaks all the rules. But what defines it is that each word carries weight. There's an economy to poetry, let's say. Every line matters and every pause matters. So the silence is just as important as what is said and what is not said. Some poems tell stories, and others capture a single emotion or a moment in time. You read a poem, and if it's working, it hits something in your gut, or it helps you to see the world differently. So songwriting versus poetry. Is songwriting just poetry with a soundtrack? Songwriting might be thought of as just poetry set to music. Sometimes, yes, that is true, like, say, London Bridge song, or, simple rhymes and songs like Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. But more often than not. So songwriting is its own unique form of creative writing, and at first glance, the tools seem similar to poems. They seem the same. There's rhythm in the words, there's rhyming, there's metaphors. They're both found in songs and poems. However, songs are meant to be heard and not just read as lyrics on a piece of paper. They're built to be sung. They follow a melody and they work with a beat, and that changes everything with song. Lyrics in a song need to fit a structure that matches the music that it has. It has got a structure of verses and choruses, and then maybe a bridge and back to the chorus and the end. There's a lot of repetition. There's a hook in the song and a lyric that sounds amazing when it's sung, but might just look pretty simple on paper and not very interesting. Let's take, for example, the Beatles song, Let It Be. When written, the chorus lyrics are, let it be, let it be, let it be, let it be. Now, written on paper, it just seems very repetitive and not very noteworthy at all. But as part of the song, well, it just sounds iconic and uplifting and even spiritual as it's sung. It's also the repetitive section of the song, so everyone can learn it and sing it to be part of it, and they can be part of the song. So the music then helps to bring the words to life, helps to give the emotion, and helps it to carry through, not just through the language, but through the tone, the melody, the tempo, and the instrumentation of the song. Poetry, on the other hand, is meant to be read by the reader in their own voice. It allows the reader to read the poem as they want, allows them to maybe interpret the words and meanings and form their own version of the way that the words should sound and the way they should be said and heard when it might be said out loud. Here are a few more differences between poetry and songwriting. So number one, purpose. Poetry exists to be read or spoken. It's usually a solitary experience. So there's one person, one writer, one reader. Now, songwriting, on the other hand, is designed to be performed. The end goal is music, which becomes a shared experience of everyone. And sometimes it's done in a live setting, in concerts, with thousands of people, or it's done in a studio, but still the song is sung and recorded, so it could be played for lots and lots of people to listen to. Number two, sound versus silence. Poets use silence. They have space in their writing, and even the visual form of how they're writing things. Think of shape poems. They write the words as the shape of the object. The words relate to the shape of the object. Maybe they leave gaps in certain places. Maybe they fill the object up. Maybe they don't. And think of how a poem looks on that page. There can be blank spaces as well, but it's also part of the poem. It's part of the meaning of the poem and what the poem might be about, the topic, the words and the subject. Songwriters, on the other hand, write for the sound. They have lyrics, and it needs to flow with a melody. And they often need to repeat words to reinforce the emotions. That's where the chorus comes in. Number three, form and constraint. Poets can kind of invent their own rules on certain poems, such as the free-verse poem writing, or they follow traditional poetry forms, such as haikus, which is one line of 5 syllables, one line of 7 syllables, one line of 5 syllables. Songwriters have to fit within the framework of the song's rhythm and length. They don't necessarily have to follow the same rules as another song, but they have to have the length of the song maybe 2 minutes long or 5 minutes long, maximum maybe 4. And they might only have a few syllables per line or a set pattern that repeats. For example, the chorus that has to be repeated again and again. Then the verse would be different than the chorus. Then they have a bridge maybe, and then the end of the song. Number 4, collaboration. Poetry, as I mentioned before, is usually a solo act. One person has written their poem and they want to read it out to someone else, or they get one person to read their poem. So it's one person usually. Songs can be one person, or it can often involve lots of different people. We can have a band of singers and different parts of the song which different people will sing. Even the solo artists as well, they might have co-writers or they have producers, and also they have the people who play the instruments, the musicians. They work with them to help them create their final products. Now, just because they're all different, just because poems and songs are different, doesn't mean that they're unrelated, of course. These are differences that we note. But some of the best lyricists of songs are poets at heart, really. Bob Dylan won the Nobel Prize in Literature for his songwriting. He was blurring the lines between literary poetry and popular music. There's artists like, say, Joni Mitchell, Kendrick Lamar, Patti Smith, Leonard Cohen. Many of them started as poets, or they had published poetry alongside their music lyrics. And vice versa. Poets sometimes borrowed songs and structure from songs. They might have used refrains in their poems and rhythm in their poems, and maybe even sound devices like alliteration or internal rhyme to create a musicality in their poems. There's a constant exchange. Poetry and songwriting are like cousins, really. They're raised in the same family, but they speak different dialects. So why does this matter? Why should we care about differences between poems and songwriting? Depends, because usually the understanding then helps to deepen our appreciation for each type of creative writing. When you hear a song, listen to the lyrics as well. What is the singer trying to say just beyond the beat of the sound and the music, the drum and the bass and the guitar? What's the emotion behind the song that they're trying to put across to you? And when you read a poem, try to hear the rhythm of the poem. Read it, sing it in your mind, put a beat to it, and then try to think, how does this poem work? What is the writer trying to get the reader to think about as they read the poem in their mind? And if you're a writer yourself, why not you try writing both? Try writing a poem and then try turning it into a song. You might find very quickly how the form shifts your creative approach. It's a great exercise as well in your flexibility and expression of your words, your rhythm, your rhyme, your pacing, your alliteration, and so on and so on. Ultimately, both poetry and songwriting help to remind us that words are more than just communication. They're both works of creative writing. They're works of art. Well, that's all for this podcast. Thanks for listening. And if you're someone who loves writing poetry, then I hope that this has inspired you or guided you into thinking about writing your own poems and working on it, maybe making it into a song, changing your poem into lyrics to create your own song in the future. So before I finish, I'll leave you with this quote from Robert Frost, a famous poet. Poetry is what gets lost in translation, but music, that's what brings it all back again. If you enjoyed this podcast and would like to listen to more, then like and subscribe to Hanaz Writers on their podcast channels. They've got one on Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, YouTube, and Spotify. You can also search for Hanaz Writers Podcast on their website, and you can start listening to all the available podcasts on them. If you are also interested in becoming a published author yourself, then why not visit Hanaz Writers' website, and you can sign up for free. You can start writing your stories and poems on there, and you can also get help and guidance on how to publish them through the website. Thank you for listening, and until next time, bye!